Hello everyone, welcome back to Force Fellow. My name is Ashok. Today's video will be a practical video where we will complete a specific use case in LWC. This process will help you to learn how to work on real-world applications to complete a given requirement. Because here we will mostly focus on practical, we won't focus on theory. Once you will complete this video, I'm sure you will definitely feel more confident to work on real-world applications and in interviews as well. If you are an absolute beginner in LWC and want to learn from scratch, then you can check out my another videos on Force Fellow YouTube channel, or you can find links below in video description as well. Alright, now let's start today's video. And first, let me walk you through the use case which we will develop in this video. I already implemented today's use case in my another org. Let me open that and explain to you. So as part of today's use case, we will give an option to user to create multiple contacts at a time for an account. And in out-of-box UI, we can only create one contact at a time. But let's say we have a requirement to give an option to user to add multiple new contacts for an account with few fields. Then definitely we have to go with a custom solution. With out-of-box tools, we can't achieve it. And for custom UI development, LWC is the most preferred option we have in Salesforce, right? So now here, in order to complete this requirement, first we have added an action button on account record page called add multiple contacts. Once we'll click on this, then a LWC component will open as a modal popup. Now here, what user can do? User can add multiple contacts against this account. How? So initially when this component is loading, at that time by default we are adding one row, and here we have fields to enter first name, last name, email and gender for new contact. For first name, last name and email we have added text boxes, and for gender we have added picklist. And on top of this we have a add button. Once we will click on this, a new row will be added at last with same controls. And similarly, we can add n number of rows as per our requirement. Okay. Now with each row, we have a delete button. So once we will click on this, then that row will be deleted like this. Okay. And we are not allowing to delete last row. At least one row should be there. Like if I'll try to delete this last row, then it should show an error message. You can't delete last contact. Okay, so here we have added a client-side validation to achieve this. Now, at last we have a submit button. So once we'll click on this, then first we are checking some field validations, and then we are saving data into database. For example, let's try to create two contacts. As of now, we only filled first name. Now let's click on submit. Alright, we can see an error toast. And also we can see error message with last name fields. So let me enter last name. And also add email address. You can see here email validation is also applied. We have to enter email in a valid format. I just entered dummy emails. Let's also select gender and click on submit. Alright, we can see a success toast message, which means data has been successfully created into database. And here if you'll click on this related tab, then here we have contacts list. So we can see our new contacts here. This is the David Warner and this is the Rachit Ravindra. Okay, so this is what we will create in this video, where simply we have to give an option to create multiple contacts for an account. And this whole requirement we will complete using LWC. Okay, this use case may looks very simple to you, but believe me, if you'll go ahead and complete it, then definitely it will give you lots of learnings and help you to do practice. So before moving ahead, first let me show you what all things we will learn after completing this use case. So here we will learn how to open a LWC component as a modal pop-up. On action button click, and next we will learn how to dynamically add and remove rows in table. And also we will learn how to apply validations on HTML controls and how to save multiple records in database from LWC and what approach we should use to achieve this requirement. And along with this, we will learn how to show toast messages, how to close a modal pop-up, what are decorators, and how to get picklist values from fields and show in LWC components. And also we will learn many other things. Alright? So as I said, this use case is interesting and you will learn lots of things while completing this. And similar use cases we often get in our real world applications as well. So it will be very helpful for you if you will complete it by yourself. Okay? I think now you have fair understanding about what we will build and what you will learn in this video. So if you already have knowledge about all these topics or only looking for a use case for practice, then you can start working on it by yourself, else you can go with me. Alright? Since you want to learn more insights and go with me, so now let's get started to complete this requirement. And as discussed, we will complete this requirement using LWC. And you know, we can't create LWC components in any Salesforce IDE. I mean, we can't create LWC components in Salesforce Setup or in Developer Console. To create LWC components, we generally use VS Code. That is a offline IDE. And nowadays we can use online version of it, that is Code Builder, which is mostly similar to VS Code. Okay? For now, I'll go with VS Code. But if you want, I can create a separate video to explain how to use Code Builder to create LWC components or for Salesforce development. Then do let me know in the comments. Alright? Now, let me open VS Code. If you don't have VS Code set up in your system, then you can check out my LWC crash course video where I already explained all these basics in detail. Link is available in description. Okay? Now here, to create LWC component or to do any Salesforce related development activity, we require a SFDX project. If you already have a SFDX project created, then you can use that. Else you can create a new by opening command plate window. To open it, you can press F1 or Ctrl+Shift+P in Windows and Command+Shift+P in Mac. And here, let's select Create Project option. It may take few seconds to respond. Now here, you can select Standardized Template. And here, let's provide project name. And press Enter. Now let's select folder location where we want to store this project. Alright, this is how we can create a new SFDX project in VS Code. Now, to connect this project with our Salesforce org, we have to authorize our org by selecting this Authorize an Org option. In my case, I have already authorized my org, so I'll select that. And for that, I just have to click here. Now here you can see all authorized orgs. So you can select your org here. If you want to see authorization process completely, then you can check out crash course video where I already explained all these basic steps in detail. Alright. So as of now, we are done with project creation and org authorization. Now, if we revisit our use case, then as per that, we have to provide an option to create multiple contacts for an account. And as discussed, we will complete this requirement through LWC. And as a solution, we will create an action on account record page and open component from there. So now, first let's create a LWC component. And for that, let's open command plate window and select create lightning web component option. Here, let's provide component name and hit on enter. Alright, new component is created and stored into LWC folder. And as part of this component bundle, by default it creates 3 files. First is the HTML file, where we write HTML markup or whatever we want to show on UI, that we write here. Next we have JS file, where we write all the logics to get and store data or to do manipulation. At last we have meta XML file. We also called it meta config file, where we can define configurations related to this component. Okay. So by default in component bundle, CLI only create these 3 files, but additionally we can create 2 more files if required, CSS and SVG. Okay. As of now, this component is only available on our local system, which means this is not created in our org. So to create it into org, we have to deploy it from here. But before that, let's do some changes here in meta config file. We want to open this component from a record action. So let me make some changes here to allow this component to use with record actions. Okay. So here first I have marked this isExpose property as true. Why? Because if we have this isExpose property as false, which means we can only use this component into another components as a child component, but individually we can't use it anywhere in Salesforce org, like in Lightning or community pages or in flows or anywhere other than another components. So if we want to use this component individually anywhere in Salesforce, then we have to set this isExpose as true. But where we can use it, that we need to define in targets. So here in targets, we can define all the areas where we want to add this component, like Lightning app page, home page, record page, utility bar, flow screen, and community pages, and many others. So after marking isExpose true, here in targets, we have to define all the targets where we want to use this component. For now, we only want to open it from record action. So we have added this lightning record action as target, but as per your requirement, you can add multiple targets as well. For example, let's say you want to add this component on home page as well. Then in targets, you have to define home page as target. Okay. So this is how you can define multiple targets here. Alright. Now, I think we are good to deploy this component. So let's right click and select this deploy this source to org option. Now this component is being deployed on our org. Deployment is done. Now let's open our org, and for that you can click on this open org icon. Here we want to open this component from account record page with an action button, which means we have to create an action in account object. So let's navigate to object manager and here select account object, and here let's open buttons, links and actions tab. Click on new action. In action type, let's select lightning web component. Now here you can see our component. Why? Because we have added record action in targets. So here you will see all the components which has record action in targets. If you are not able to see your component here, then please check targets in meta config file. This record action target should be added. Okay. Now here let's provide label as add multiple contexts and click on save. New account action is created. Now let's open any account record page to check whether action is visible or not. No, here we can't see our new action. Why? Because we have not added it in page layout. To show that here, either we have to edit in page layout or in lightning record page. So for now, let's open page layouts. And here click on mobile and lightning actions. Here find our action by name. Here it is. Now let's drag it from here and drop on Salesforce mobile and lightning experience actions. But it is not allowed here for now because actions are already predefined by Salesforce. So if you want to add our custom actions, then we have to override that. And for that, let's click on this icon. Now let's try again to drag and drop. Okay, so this is how we can add an action on page layout. Now let's click on quick save and refresh our account record page. Alright, now we can see add multiple contacts action button here. If you are not able to see that here, then you can check by clicking on this bottom arrow icon. Maybe in page layout, you have added that button at last. I mean here you might not added that in front. If you want to show that button without clicking on arrow icon, then you have to add that here at first or second position, because these buttons will render in this defined order on record page. So initial 2-3 buttons will visible here and rest all will visible here in drop down menu. Okay, now let's click on this button. Alright, we can see a modal pop-up overlay here, but we can't see anything. Why? Because in our LWC component, we have not written anything in HTML file, right? So once we'll write anything there, then that will visible here as a modal pop-up. Alright, so this is how we can open a LWC component from Lightning record page action. Okay, now let's move ahead, and if we see in our demo implementation, then here in modal pop-up, first we are showing this heading add multiple contacts. Then we have to show a table with 5 columns. In last column, we have to show a add button. In table body, we are showing these HTML controls and delete button. At last in footer, we are showing a submit button. Okay, so now let's start working on our LWC component to achieve this requirement. First, let's start with header and footer part. To show this add multiple contacts title and submit button. So let's open our VS Code again and open component HTML file. Now here, let's add div to show header and footer. Okay, here we have added 2 divs, first to show header and second is to show footer. So here we have added add multiple contacts as title in header, and in footer we have added a submit button. Now let me deploy this component and show you how it will look like. Deployment is done. Here let's click on add multiple contacts button. Alright, now here we can see title and submit button, but UI is not good. If we compare it with our demo UI, then here we can see title in center with large font and submit button is available in right side. And also here we can see enough padding, so it's look like header and footer, but in our case, it is not looking like that. Now the question is how we can make our UI better. So using HTML, we can only add elements on browser, but if you want to change their look and feel, if you want to show them with good look and feel, or if you want to change their default looking behavior, then we have to use CSS. CSS can help us to design our web pages. Okay. Now here in Lightning Web Components, either you can write whole CSS by yourself, or you can use Salesforce out-of-box CSS classes as well. Salesforce has their own CSS framework that is called Lightning Design System or SLDS. In SLDS, we can find many pre-built CSS classes for basic things. If you want to know more about this, then you can check out on Google. Okay. So as a good practice, before writing custom CSS for any requirement, first, we should always check that if our requirement can be achieved through SLDS, then we should use that only. We should not write custom CSS always. Now, in this case, we want to show this text in large font size. So let's find SLDS class for that. Here, let's open first link of Lightning Design System website. And here if you'll scroll a little bit, then you can see this is the example of large text heading and this class is being used here. So let's copy it and use it with our heading div. So let's type class and paste our value. Now this class will increase font size for this text, but we also want to show this div as header. So for that, let's add SLDS modal header class. And similarly, let's add modal footer class with this div. Okay, these classes also you can find on SLDS website. And here we also want to show this submit button at right side. So let's add CSS class for that as well. And if you don't know class name, then you can simply find here in SLDS website. Let's find right here. Here you can see this is the example of right alignment. I mean, you can see text is displayed at right side, and for that this class is being used here. So let's copy it and paste with our footer. Okay, now we are done with CSS changes. So let's deploy and test it again. Alright, now here we can see header and footer with good design, and we have not written any custom CSS for this. We have used SLDS CSS classes. So this is how using SLDS CSS classes you can make your component design better. And if you feel for any use case SLDS classes are not available, then you can write your custom CSS. We'll show you in couple of minutes how and where we can write your custom CSS. Okay. Now let's start working on this table, where in header we have to show labels with add button, and in body we want to add 3 text boxes with a drop down and delete button. Okay, so here first let me write HTML markup, then we'll explain it to you. Okay, so here what we have done, first we have added table tag with t head and t body. Under table header we have added a tr with 5 td, which means 5 columns will be there, and added label for each column. And also in last column added a lightning button icon to show add new contact button. Okay, in table body also we have added a tr with 5 td. In first 3 we have added lightning input text boxes for first name, last name and email. Here in 4th td we will add combo box in some time, and at last here we have added a lightning button icon for delete button. Okay, I think this is pretty simple and clear to you. So let's deploy this component and test it again. Still we can't see our table, so maybe due to browser cache. So let's try to clear browser cache. Alright, now we can see a table with 5 columns. In header we can see labels with add button. In body, we can see 3 text boxes for first name, last name and email. At last we can see a delete button, right? So this is how we can add a table with HTML controls. But here with each text box, we can see label again, and that we definitely don't want to show again here because we already defined label in table header, right? So to remove this label from each control, either we can remove this label attribute from here, or we can add label hidden as variant like this. Adding label hidden variant would be best option because this will hide label tag from UI and will also not show blank space there. Okay, so let me add this variant with all text boxes. Now let's deploy this component and test it again. Alright, now we can see label with each text box, which means labels will only available in header. Okay, but still UI is not looking good here. I mean, if we see in demo implementation, then here you can see labels are coming with bold font, and also we can see enough space between each control. I mean, padding is there. So to achieve this same requirement here, let's write some custom CSS. Though we can achieve these requirements without writing custom CSS as well. I mean, we can use SLDS classes to achieve this, but here I want to show you how we can write custom CSS. Okay, so if you want to write custom CSS in component, then first we require a CSS file created under component bundle. I mean, as I said earlier, by default CLI creates only 3 files under component bundle, but additionally create more files if required. So here let's create CSS file, but the rule is file name should be same as component name with CSS extension like this. Okay, now here we can add custom CSS for this component. So here our first requirement was to show headers with bold font. So let me write CSS for that. Okay, so to write custom CSS, first we have to define selectors, like on what all elements we want to add this CSS. So here we have defined thead td, which means this CSS will apply on td which are available in thead. It means on all the headers. Okay. Similarly, we can add multiple selectors here, separating by comma. Okay. Then in curly braces, we have to write our custom CSS. So here we have used font weight CSS and assigned bold as value. So now what it will do? It will make text bold where in thead td. Okay. Now our second requirement was to show some padding with each column. So let's write CSS for that. And let's assign 10 pixel as value. Okay. So this is how we can write our custom CSS in component. Now let's deploy this component and test it again. Alright, now UI is looking much better. Okay, and now as a next step, let's see how we can bind a dropdown to take context gender, and to show a dropdown we will use lightning combo box. So first let me write basic HTML markup. Alright, here we have used lightning combo box with label, variant and placeholder. Now, if you want to bind values with this dropdown, I mean what all options should be available in this dropdown, that we can provide in options attribute. So let's add options attribute. And here as a value, we have to provide an array with options. And that array we have to declare in JS file. So let's open JS file and declare an array with few items. Okay, here we have declared an genders array with 2 items. And for lightning combo box, each item should contain two properties, label and value. Label will be displayed on UI and value can be used for backend purpose only. Okay. So this is how we have added two options in genders array, male and female. And now we can provide that genders array here in options attribute like. Alright. So now what will happen? While rendering this drop down on browser, these two options will be added there. Okay. But here we have added these options statically in code, which means in future, if you want to add more options in drop down or if you want to remove any option, then we have to make changes in code, and that's not a good practice, right? So if you have a picklist field and want to show that as drop down in LWC, then instead of adding values statically in JS file, we should always read values from picklist field. In case if you don't have any picklist field or if you want to show some different values, then you can statically write here, or we can store in custom settings or metadata types and read from there. Okay. But in our current use case, in context object, we have a gender picklist field. Let me show you that. Alright, here in contact object, you can see a gender identity field which has these values like male, female, non-binary and not listed. So as a best practice, instead of providing static values in code, let's read values from here and show them in drop down in LWC. First, let me write code, then we'll explain it to you. Okay, so here what we have done, first we have imported this getPicklistValues method from UI object info API module and using wire decorator called this method and passed field API name as gender identity field. And here also as a best practice, instead of writing field name statically here, we have imported from schema module, and in this record type ID field, we have to provide record type ID. This is also a required parameter. And here we can't write record type ID statically because that may be different in another environment. I mean, that can be different in staging or in production environment, right? So now the question is how we can get record type ID dynamically from salesforce org. So answer would be using get object info wire adapter. I mean, record type details are also available in object. So using get object info method, we can also get record type details. First, let me write code, then we'll explain it to you. Okay, so here first we have imported this get object info method from UI object info API module. Then using wire decorator called this method and passed contact object in object API name parameter. Okay, so what it will do, it will get object details and store in contact object info property. And here to pass record type ID value, we have written contact object info .data.default record type ID, because in this contact object info property, actual data will be available in data property. That's the default behavior of wire decorator. Like wire decorator returns two properties, error and data. So actual data will be available in data property. Then we have written default record type ID. To pass default record type ID of contact object. I mean, we can have multiple record types in an object. So to get default record type ID, we have used this property. Okay. So this is how we can get record type ID using getObjectInfo method. And this is how we can read picklist options from field using getPicklistValues method. Okay. Now, instead of these static values, let's bind dynamic values with combo box. Okay, so from here we have removed static array and created a getter property and referred this in combo box. Okay, now here you might be thinking why I created this getter property. Can't we directly refer this gender picklist values property with combo box? Then answer would be yes, we can directly refer it there, but when we use wire decorator, then actual data will be available in data property. And on initial component load, this data will be undefined. So if we'll directly refer it, then we'll get error. But in this case, if we are using getter property, then we'll not get error. Why? Because here we have used question mark. So what it will do? It will avoid right side code if left side value is null or undefined, right? So we'll not get any kind of error here. Okay. And we can't directly use this question mark in HTML because this is not supported there. So it's always better to use getter property in such kind of requirements. Alright. Now I think we are done with code. If we reiterate what we have done to add this dropdown, then first we have added lightning combo box in HTML and in options assigned this property. And here in JS file, we are reading data directly from field using getPicklistValues method. Okay, from which field it will get data that we have defined here in field API name parameter. So here we have passed gender identity field. Okay, now I think it's clear to you. So let's deploy this component and test it again. Alright, now we can see a drop down list here. But we can't see any option into this, which means something went wrong while fetching data. Now the question is how to debug this issue or what we can do in such kind of situations to identify what can be the cause, because our code is fine, but still we are not getting data, right? So we are reading data using wire decorator, and wire decorator can be used in two ways. First is as a function and second is as a property. Here we are using wired property to fetch data. Like this is simply a property, not a function. And if I show you the example of function, then that will look like this. So as I explained earlier, that wired decorator will return two properties, data and error. So if we are using method, then we can put debugger here, and in browser we can easily debug. But generally, if we don't want to manipulate response, then we simply use property instead of wired method like this. But here we can't put debugger. Why? Because this is simply a property and everything is done internally by framework, right? But now the good thing is after Winter 23 release, we can also debug wired properties. Let me show you how we can debug. So first let's open browser inspect window. And here, let's select component root element that you can find by component name. So our component name is add multiple contacts, and for custom components, C will be the prefix. So this is our component root element. Let's select this. Now let's open console tab. And here let's write $0 and press enter. Now here you can find component details. Let's expand this debug object. Here you can see wire. In our component, we have two wired properties. We are not getting data from this gender picklist values. So let's expand it. And here in data, you can see we are getting two properties, data and error. Data is undefined, but in error, we have something. So let's check it. So in body, we can see the requested resource does not exist and status code is 404, which means either this requested field is not available in our org or maybe we do not have read permission on that. So as we have already checked, gender identity field is already there. So now let's check for permission on this field. So let's open profiles. And here open system administrator profile because my current user is assigned system administrator. Now here let's find field level. And here let's find contact. Here let's check for gender. See, here we do not have read and write both permissions. So that's why we are getting that 404 not found error. Now to resolve that error, let's assign permission to this profile. And click on save. Now you can see we have read and write both permissions on this field. Now let's try again. Alright, now we can see 4 options here which are available in contact object. I mean, these options are directly coming from contact object. So in future, if we add or remove any values from object, then those will directly reflect here without any code change. Okay, so this is how we can bind a drop-down list in LWC. And as we have seen, we can bind drop-down in 2 ways. Either we can assign static values or we can read values from object field using getPicklistValues method. Okay, so far so good. Now let's move ahead and see how we can add multiple rows here. I mean, as of now here we can see only one row, but as we have seen in our demo, we can add multiple rows by clicking on this add button. So now let's see how we can achieve this requirement. Let's open VS Code again. And here if we see in HTML template, then here in body, we have only one TR, which means only one row will be there. But now if you want to show multiple rows or if you want to repeat same row multiple times, as many times we click on that add button, then which means we have to loop this same row multiple times. And you know, in LWC, if you want to run a loop in HTML template, then either we can use for each directive or iterator directive. With for each, we can identify first or last item. I mean, if you want to do something different with first or last item, then we can use iterator because this capacity is only available with iterator directive. But if we don't have such kind of requirement and only want to iterate items, then we can use for each directive. Okay. And you know, here in LWC, we will require an array to use with for each directive. So let's create that in JS file. But before that, first let's add onClick listener with add button. Okay, so we have added onClick listener with add button and assigned this handler method and also created this handler method here in JavaScript file. Alright, now here first let me write code, then I will explain it to you. Alright, so here what we have done, first we have created an contacts array, then here in onClick handler, added new item in contacts array as an object with temp ID property. Why we added temp ID property? Because you know, for each directory require an unique identifier with each row, and that same unique identifier we will use to do further manipulations as well, like while deleting the row or while saving the data. For example, let's say we have added 5 rows. Now we want to delete one of them by clicking on delete button. Then which row will be deleted? So to identify this, we will definitely require a unique identifier with each row, right? So this temp ID will work as unique identifier because here we are assigning value as date.now, which always returns a unique number calculated from current date and time. Okay. Next, here in HTML template, we have used for each directive and assigned context array. And here in for item, we can assign any local variable name. So I have used contact here. And when we use for each directive, then with very first element, we have to use key attribute and assign a unique value. So here we have used temp ID property. Okay. Now what will happen? Once we will click on add button, then this handler method will get called. Then this code will add new row in context property. And here in HTML, we have used for each directive with context array. So it will iterate through all the items which are available in this context array. Okay. Now I think we are good with this code, but before deployment, we need to consider one more thing. That is, on component load, we want to show one row by default, which means we need to add that row on component load. So if we want to add an item on component load or without doing any manual action, then either we can add that item while declaring this array or in connected callback lifecycle hook. So to achieve this requirement, here we have used connected callback and call this add new click handler method here, which means whenever this component will get load, then this connected callback method will get called. And here we are calling add new contact handler. So that will add new item in contact array. Okay. Now let's deploy this component and test it again. Alright, here we can see one row by default. Now, if you want to add more rows, then click on this add button. Seems it is not working. Maybe something went wrong. I clicked multiple times on this button, but we can't see more rows here. I mean, nothing is happening on clicking of this button. Now, to identify the actual code or the issue which is happening here, let's debug our code here in browser. In browser, we can only debug JavaScript code. We can't debug Apex code because that executes on server and component.js code executes on client. That is browser in our case. Okay. So if you want to debug your JS code here in browser, then we have to open inspect window and here open sources tab. Now here let's press Ctrl P to open file and here let's type our component name. You can see your component.js file here. Sometimes here you may find multiple files with same name, but if you want to debug your code, then you have to open the file which is available in module C folder. So let's click on this. Okay. Now here in this file, you may find whole code which we have written in our component.js file. So here let's find add new click handler. You can see same code which we have written in our component.js file. Now to add debugger here, let's click on this line number. Now you can see a blue icon here, which means debugger is added. And this debugger will only added when you enable debug mode for your user. Let me show you how you can enable it. First, let's open setup. Here let's type debug mode. Here, check this checkbox for your user and click on enable button. Okay. After enabling this, you have to refresh your browser and then you will be able to add debugger. Okay. Now let's try to debug our component and click on add button. Now you can see code execution is paused here and now we can debug our component and see what is going on and what all values we have in variables. So let's check in context array, and for that you just have to do mouse hover. This will show available value here, or we can write variable name here in console window as well, like this dot contacts, like this. Now you can see only one item available in this array because this code is pending to execute. and once you'll press F10 and then this code will execute. And now if we'll check it again, then now you can see 2 items are available in this array, which means items are getting added in this array, but those are not rendering on UI. And why this is happening? So this is because we have not added track decorator with our contacts array. Now if we talk about track decorator, then we can say track decorator helps to make properties reactive. Reactive means whenever value gets changed in property, then it will automatically notify to all the subscribers. I mean, value will automatically get updated wherever we have used this property. And this track decorator is only required with non-primitive data types, not with primitive data types. I mean, if we have primitive data types such as string, bool and numbers, then track decorator is not required because these are by default trackable. But if we have non-primitive data types such as object and array, then we have to add track decorator to make them reactive. Okay. So if we want to automatically show new items on UI, then we have to make this contacts array as reactive. And for that, let's add track decorator and test it again. Now let's click on this add button again. Alright, we can see new row has been added here. Let's try to click again. One more row has been added, which means our functionality is working as expected. Okay, so this is how you can easily debug your component and identify issues. Alright, now let's work on this delete button. I mean, whenever we click on this delete button, then that row should automatically delete from here, right? So let's work on that. And first let me write code, then we'll explain it to you. Okay, so first we have added onClick listener with delete button and assigned this handler method and also created this handler method here in JavaScript file. Now here in this handler method, first we checked contacts array length. If that is equals to 1, then we are showing an error toast message and then directly return from here only, because you know we want to add a validation to not allow to delete last row. At least one row should be there, right? So that's why we have added this condition, and this is how you can add your custom validations in JavaScript code. Now here to identify which row should be deleted, I mean, let's say we have 5 rows and user want to delete one of them. Then here in code, how we will identify on which row user clicked or which row user wants to delete, right? So to identify this, what we have done, we have added our unique temp ID with each delete button as a data attribute. Here data-temp-id and assigned temp ID from contact, which means with each button this unique ID will be added So now once user will click on delete button, then this handler method will get called, and in this event object, we will get our button details in target property, which means now here we can access all the details related to that button. And if you want to get data properties which are added to this button, then those we can access from dataset property. I mean, whatever details we have added with HTML element as a data attribute, those attribute values will be available here in dataset property in camel case. Here in HTML, we have written data-temp-id, but when we convert it into camel case, then it will become temp id and no need to write data here. Okay. So this is how here in temp id variable, we will get row identifier on which user clicked. Now to remove that item from array, there are many ways available in JavaScript, but here I have used simple one. I mean, here simply we have used JavaScript filter method, and here in condition, check that item temp id should not equals to this temp id, which means now in this contacts array, we will get all the contacts other than current. I mean the contact which has this temp id. So this is how current row will be excluded from this array, and remaining ones will again assign to this contacts array. Okay. So this is how we are deleting row from array, and due to reactive behavior, it will automatically remove from UI as well. Let me deploy this component and show you. First, let's add 4 to 5 rows here. Now let's say we want to delete this third row. So let's click on this button. Alright, now we can see one row deleted, but which one is deleted? We are not sure about that, right? So let's add something here in this text box and click on this delete button. Okay, now we can see that row has been deleted, and let's verify our validation as well. Alright, we can see error message as well, which means our validation is also working as expected. So far so good. And now let's start working on this submit button to save data into database. But before that, we have to think about how we will get these controls value into JavaScript file. I mean, these controls are available on HTML file, but to save their data, we have to access their values into JavaScript, because we can't save data from HTML. HTML can only help us to show elements on UI. But if you want to save data into database, then we have to read these controls values into JavaScript file. And from there, we can save data by calling apex method or using wire adapter. Okay. So now our next task should be read and store these elements values into JavaScript file. And how we can do that? Here in this video, I'll show you only one way. But on this topic, I have already created another video which covers 5 different ways to read values from HTML elements. We'll share that video link in description. You can check out that if you want to learn more ways. Alright. So as I said, there are multiple ways available to read values, but which one we should use? That's completely depends on the actual requirement or on the situation. Here we will use one of the basic approach which we generally use, that is using event listeners. I mean, with every HTML element, there are lots of predefined events available, like onClick, onChange, onKeyUp, onKeyDown, and many more. Now, if we want to execute our custom logics on these events, then we can define event listeners and assign handler methods. So whenever that event occurs, then JavaScript handler method will get called, right? So here to read text box value, we can use onChange or onBlur event. OnChange will trigger whenever text box value gets changed, and onBlur will trigger when cursor will move out of the element, whether value gets changed or not. Here I'll use onBlur because that will trigger only once, even if I'll enter multiple characters as well. But onChange will trigger with every key press, right? So let's add onBlur event listener with this first name. Alright, here we have added onBlur event listener and assigned this handler method. Also created this handler method here in JavaScript file. which means whenever we will make changes in this text box and try to move out, then this onBlur event listener will trigger and call this handler method. Now here in this event object, we will get all the information about the event, including target element details. Target element means element on which event occurred. So if you want to get the text box element here, then that we can find in this event parameter, and then using that we can easily read value. Let me show you how to read. Alright, so here simply we have written event.target, which will return our text box element, and in value property, text box value will be available. So that's why here we have written event.target.value. Okay, so this is how we can get element value in JavaScript file. Now the question is where we will store this value, and what if we add multiple rows? Then there will be multiple first name elements will available, right? So in that case, how and where we will store values? Well, in this case, we will store values in this context array only. Alright, so first here in HTML file, we have added temp ID with data attribute. Why we have added this? Because there can be multiple rows, and in each row there will be a first name text box, which means there will be multiple text boxes available for first name, right? So using this temp ID, we will be able to identify that this text box belongs to which row and read and store value accordingly. Okay. So these kind of additional values we can add with elements as a data attribute. Data attributes are custom attributes. If we want, we can add any custom attribute as per our requirement. I mean, if we want to bind more details with element to access further, then we can add as a data attribute in kebab case with data prefix. Like let's say you want to bind record ID, then you can edit something like data-record-id. And then here you can assign your record ID property like, okay. Now here in first name change handler, we can easily read temp ID from target dataset like this. And as I said, we will store this value in context array. So using JavaScript find method, we got particular row on the basis of temp ID. I mean, here we have added a condition that row temp ID should be equals to this temp ID. Okay, so it will return a particular row which matches to element temp ID. Now here we are assigning value in first name property. Okay, and JavaScript is a loosely typed language, so we can add new properties in object anytime, right? So this is how first name value will be added in particular row. Now let me deploy and show it in inspect window. Here I'll show you value in inspect by adding a debugger. So let's open inspect window, and first let's add debugger on change handler. Let's add it here. Now let's type something in text box, and as I said, onBlur will trigger whenever we'll try to move out of the element. So let me click outside. See, event is triggered and our handler method get called. And here if you'll hover on this value, then you can see test here. And if you'll hover on temp ID, then you can see temp ID value here. Okay. Now let me press F10 to execute next line. Now, if we want to check what we have in this contact row variable, then we can't directly check it here because this is a proxy object. So to check values of proxy object, we have to convert it into string using json.stringify method. Like, then see, as of now we only have temp ID with this value, but once we execute this line of code, like, and check it again, then you can see first name property is also added with test value. So this is how in JavaScript we can add new properties dynamically in object. Alright. So as of now, we only stored first name value, and now let's store for other fields as well. Now here the question is, do we need to write the same code for other fields as well? Like this is for last name and this is for email. Is this a good approach? Because as of now we only have 3 to 4 fields, but let's say somewhere we have lots of fields like 50 or 100, then will we create 100 handler methods for them? No, that's not a good approach. We should always think about generic approach where we can leverage same code. Now let me write a generic handler method which can work for all the fields. Okay, so here what we have done, first we have added name attribute with all the fields like first name, last name, email and gender identity. These names are the same as field API name in contact object, and then here in new handler method, instead of writing property name here statically, we have used element name attribute. And now let's use this handler method with all the elements. Okay, now what will happen? This same handler method will get called from all the elements, but the name attribute will be different. So when it will call from first name, then in name attribute we will get first name as value, and similarly we'll get last name if it will call from last name text box. Okay, so this is how this single handler method will work for all the elements. Alright, but you might need to make some changes here. If you add more field types, like as of now we are using lightning input and combo box, but if you use here checkbox or radio button, then you have to make some changes here. I mean, in case of checkbox or radio button, we won't be able to get value in this value property. There we have checked property. Okay, so here you can add conditions on the basis of field type. Alright, now let's remove these other handler methods and deploy it again. Now first let's enter value in all these fields. Now let's open inspect window. Now let's add debugger in handler. And click on first name again and try to move out. Now let's check temp ID and value again. Alright, you can see value here in value property and also in temp ID. Now let's press F10 and check in console. Alright, here we can see only first name, but it should show other values as well. Now let's try to check for last name. Okay, we can't see temp ID value for last name, which means we forgot to add temp ID with other elements. Now let's add that. Alright, now we can see value of all the controls. This is for first name, last name, email and gender identity. Okay, so this is how using generic handler method we can read values from multiple HTML controls. Okay, now at last let's work on this submit button to save data. So here we will do two things. First we'll check field validations, and if all the fields are passed, and then we will proceed to save the data. Okay. As we have seen in demo implementation, last name should be required and email should be in proper format. So now let's make last name field required, and for that we just need to add required attribute with element like this. And also if you want to show asterisk icon, then let's add that here with last name label. Okay, here we have added SLDS destructive text color class, which will make asterisk color red. Okay, now let's create on-click handler and bind with submit button. Okay, now here first let's check fields validity. Let's check that all fields are valid or not. And for that, first let me write code, then we'll explain it to you. Okay, so here what we have done, first we have created another method check controls validity, and here created isValid variable with true value, and then using query selector all DOM API method we are getting all the lightning input controls. If you want to get other kind of controls as well, then you can get them by adding comma here. Like let's say you want to add lightning combo boxes as well, then just add comma and lightning combo box. Okay, now what it will do, it will select all the lightning input and combo box controls from this component, and those will be stored in this controls variable. So simply if you want to get HTML elements inside JavaScript file, then we can use query selector or query selector all DOM API method. Query selector can help us to get single element, but if we want to get multiple, then we can use query selector all. And here as a input, we have to provide selector name. So we have provided lightning input and lightning combo box. Okay. Now here using for each method, we are iterating each element, and here we have used check validity method, which checks whether this element has any constants and whether they all are passed or not. If not, then it will return false and this condition will become true, because here we have used not sign, right? Now under this condition, here we have used report validity method, which help us to show that constant error on UI. Okay, so this is how we can check field validations here in JS file. And if you want to know more about these DOM API methods or about selectors, then do let me know in the comments. We'll create a detailed video on these. Okay, now here in this submit click handler, we have called this method and checked. If it returns true, then we will proceed to save, as we are showing this error toast message. Okay, so to apply required field validation, we just have to do two things. First, in HTML markup, we need to add required attribute with field. Then in JS file, need to check field validity using check validity method. And if you want to apply email format validation, then just define type as email with field like. Okay, now it will automatically take care for email format. And now let's work to save data into database. And if you want to save multiple records from LWC, then we have to achieve it by calling apex method. We can't use wire adapters to save multiple records. Wire adapters can help us to save only one record at a time, right? But if you want to save multiple records at a time, then we have to create an apex method and call that here. So let's create an apex method to save data. But before that, first let's create an apex class. Now here, let's create a method. Okay, so here what we have done, first we have created a method with aura enable annotation. So it can be called from LWC, and as an input we are taking list of contacts, and here we have created a wrapper class with two properties, is success and message. So why we have created this wrapper class? Just to return well-defined information to client. I mean, just to return whether this request processed successfully or not. If not, then what was the reason? And if you want to access wrapper class properties in LWC, then here also we have to add aura enable annotation. Okay. Now under this method, we have used try catch. In try, first we are inserting data in contact object using insert DML statement, and then setting is success property as true. And if any error occurs while saving the data, then control will directly move to the catch block. And here we are setting is success property as false. So client will get to know something went wrong while saving the data. And in message property, we are setting exception message. Okay. So this is how we have created an apex class and method to save multiple contacts. Now let's call this method from JS file. Okay, so if we want to call an apex method in LWC, then first we have to import that from salesforce apex module, then class name, and then method name with dot. So we have imported here, and now in this if condition, we have called it using async and await. We have not used promises here. If you don't know much about promises and async await, then do let me know in the comments. We'll create a detailed video on these. Alright, now in this method, we are passing our contacts array as input, because in this array, we have all the data with correct properties. I mean, properties has same name as contact object field API names. So those details can directly received in apex in contact object, right? Because properties name are same. Now as a response, we will get this wrapper class, which means we will get these two properties, is success and message. And those will be stored in this response variable. So here we have checked if response.isSuccess is true, then we are showing success toast message, else we are showing failure message. Okay. And we want to save all these contacts under an account that we have opened right now. So here let's add current account ID in contacts array before passing it to apex method. Okay, here we have created record ID property with API decorator. Why? Because API decorator makes properties and methods as public. So they can be accessed from parent, and this record ID is a reserved keyword. I mean, Salesforce internally use this record ID property to store current record ID. So in this record ID property, we will get current record ID if we open this component in Lightning record page. Alright. Now here using for each, we are iterating each item and assigning account ID as record ID, which means now all contacts will have account ID as well. Right. It seems we are done with code. So let's deploy and test it. And before deploying this component, let's deploy this Apex class first. We got an error here because we missed return statement here. Now let's deploy this component as well. Now here, first let's check validations. I mean, let's try to click on submit without filling last name. Alright, we can see error message from server side. Our client side validations are not working. Let's open inspect window and check why it is happening. Here we are only getting one control. Oh, this is because here we have spelling mistake. Let me correct that and deploy again. Now let's try again. Alright, we can see a client side validation here. I mean, our control is also highlighted, so user can easily get to know that this field is required. Alright, now let's add one more row and try to save data. So let's fill values in these fields. Now, before clicking on this submit button, let's open inspect window and check what we are going to send to server. Alright, you can see here we have two items in this array. This is the first item and this is the second item. And each item has first name, last name, email, gender identity and account ID. And all these properties name are similar to the field API name, whatever we have in contact object. So these will be directly received in Apex, and from there data will be stored into database. Alright. And now let's check response as well, what we will get from server. So let's add debugger here and click on this play button. This is also a proxy object. So let's open console and type json.stringify and enter response here. Alright, we got true in each success property, which means our data gets saved into database. So let's close this inspect window. And here you can see a success toast message, but this pop-up is still here. It should be automatically closed whenever data gets saved into database. We'll work for this, but before that, let's verify that our contacts are created or not. And for that, let's open related tab. And here you can see this is Vinay Gupta and this is Ravi Singh, which means two new contacts created under this account, and our functionality is working as expected. Alright. Now at last, let's see how we can close this modal pop-up whenever contacts created successfully. And for that, we have to import close action screen event from Lightning Actions module. Let me import that here. And let's dispatch this event wherever we want to close this pop-up. Let's say here after showing success message, here we want to close modal pop-up. So let's write this dot dispatch event and pass close screen action event. Okay, so it will automatically close quick action modal pop-up. Alright, I think we are done with basic code, but here if you want, you can write code to show loader as well. Let me show you how you can open a loader on clicking of submit button, so user can get to know that something is happening in backend. And for that, first let's declare a boolean property with default false value, and here before calling apex method, let's set it to true. And after calling it, let's set back it to false. Now let's open HTML file, and here let's write HTML markup to show loader. Okay, here we have added lightning spinner, which will visible only when this is loading property will true, and that we are marking true just before calling apex method. And here again we are setting it false, which means this will only visible while calling apex method. Alright, now let's deploy this component and test it again. Alright, now you can see a loader, and our modal pop-up also closed after showing success message, and you can see that contact here as well, which means our functionality is working as expected and we have achieved whole requirement. Alright, so thank you for watching this video till the end, and I hope this video helped you to learn something new. So please help me too by like and subscribe my YouTube channel. I know this is completely free for you, but it will help me a lot, and I would recommend you to complete this whole use case by yourself as well, because that will give you more confidence. And I'll upload this whole code on GitHub and will share repo link in video description. So if you're stuck anywhere, then you can refer that. And still, if you're not able to solve that issue, then do let me know in the comments, or you can connect me over mail as well. Alright, once again thank you so much. Please don't forget to share your feedback in comments. That will really give me motivation to create more videos for you. And if you want me to cover any specific use case in upcoming videos, then do let me know in comments or over email. Thank you so much. We'll see you in next video.